The year is 1590. A small English ship cuts through the restless Atlantic, its sails torn from years of war and weather. On board stands John White, an anxious governor returning to the colony he founded and to the family he left behind. His heart pounds as the familiar outline of Roanoke Island emerges from the mist. This was meant to be England's first foothold in the New World, a place of hope and promise. But when his feet touch the shore, that hope turns to dread. The village is silent. The wooden walls are broken, the homes are empty, and ashes mark the spots where fires once burned. Not a soul in sight. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Only the wind moving through the empty trees. Then, carved into the bark of a single post, he sees it. One word, rough and deliberate, CROATOAN. That single word would ignite more than 4 centuries of obsession. What happened to the men, women, and children who vanished from Roanoke? Was it starvation? Betrayal? Or something far darker hidden within the wild heart of the New World? Before the United States existed, before there was a single colony that survived, there was Roanoke. It was the first attempt by the English to build a new world across the ocean. The year was 1587, and England stood on the edge of exploration and empire. The seas were filled with promise, but also with danger. Pirates, storms, and rival powers waited beyond every horizon. Yet Queen Elizabeth I wanted to plant England's flag in the Americas. She granted Sir Walter Raleigh permission to establish a colony on the coast of what is now North Carolina. This was not meant to be just another trading outpost. It was meant to be the beginning of something greater. Families were chosen, craftsmen, farmers, soldiers, and dreamers. Among them was a woman named Eleanor Dare, who would give birth to the first English child born on American soil, Virginia Dare. She represented the hope of a new beginning. The settlers carried with them not just tools and supplies, but the weight of an empire's ambition. Their leader, John White, was both a governor and an artist. His maps and paintings would one day become priceless records of the New World. But at that time, he was simply a father, a man trying to protect his family in an unfamiliar land. When the colonists arrived, they built their homes on Roanoke Island, surrounded by dense forests, shifting sands, and the endless roar of the Atlantic. To them, it was wild and unclaimed. To the native tribes who already lived there, it was ancient and sacred. At first, the colony survived. They traded with the CROATOAN people and explored the surrounding lands. But tensions rose quickly. Supplies dwindled. The settlers faced harsh weather and uncertainty. They were hundreds of miles from any English port, and every mistake was a matter of life and death. Desperate, they pleaded with John White to return to England for help. He agreed, promising to come back quickly. But history had other plans. War broke out between England and Spain, and White's return was delayed for 3 long years. When he finally came back in 1590, the world he had left behind was gone. The colony had vanished without a trace. No smoke, no bodies, no remains. Only that single word carved into a post. CROATOAN. That discovery sparked a question that still haunts historians, archaeologists, and storytellers today. How can an entire community simply disappear? Was it a tragedy of survival, a desperate migration, or a secret no one dared to tell? The mystery of Roanoke is not just about what happened to those people. It is about the birth of an idea, the moment when hope and fear met on the shores of a new world. And it is about the silence that followed. Now, to uncover the truth, we must return to the beginning, to the vision that started it all. The dream of Roanoke. The story of Roanoke begins long before the colony was ever built. It begins in the heart of England, during a time when the world itself seemed to be expanding. The year was 1584. Queen Elizabeth I ruled with power and grace, and the oceans had become the new battleground for nations seeking glory. Spain had already claimed much of the Americas, its ships returning with gold and stories of unimaginable wealth. England wanted its share of that promise. Sir Walter Raleigh, a charismatic courtier and adventurer, was granted permission by the Queen to establish a colony in the New World. To her, it was a strategic move to challenge Spanish dominance. To Raleigh, it was something more. It was a chance to carve England's name into the untouched lands across the sea. The first expedition he organized set sail that same year. It was not meant to settle permanently but to explore and report back. When the explorers reached the coast of what we now call North Carolina, they were captivated by its beauty. They wrote of fertile land, vast forests, and friendly tribes. They described it as a paradise waiting for cultivation. These glowing reports were exactly what Raleigh needed to convince investors and the Crown that a colony could succeed. But the New World was not a blank canvas. It was already home to powerful nations of its own, the Algonquian-speaking tribes who had lived there for generations. Their understanding of the land went beyond what the English could see. They knew the rhythm of the seasons, the dangers of the storms, and the balance that life required to survive in that place. The English, however, came with the mindset of conquerors. They saw opportunity, not warning. In 1585, the first English attempt to settle Roanoke began under the command of Sir Richard Grenville and Ralph Lane. It was a military-style colony, made up mostly of soldiers and explorers. They built a fort and began mapping the coast, but relations with the local tribes quickly soured. Misunderstandings turned into violence, and soon the colony was on the brink of collapse. By the following year, the settlers were starving and desperate. When an English ship led by Sir Francis Drake stopped by after raiding the Spanish in the Caribbean, they seized the chance to leave. The first colony was abandoned. But Raleigh refused to give up. 2 years later, he planned a second attempt, one that would bring families, not soldiers. This time, it would be a true settlement, a permanent English presence in the New World. John White, an artist and a man of vision, was chosen to lead it. He was not a warrior or a conqueror but a builder and a believer in the future of English life across the ocean. White gathered over 100 settlers, including his daughter Eleanor and her husband Ananias Dare. They were ordinary people with extraordinary courage, willing to leave behind everything they knew for a chance at something greater. Their journey across the Atlantic was perilous. The ocean was a living force, vast and unpredictable, and the ships were small and fragile against its storms. But after weeks of travel, they finally reached Roanoke Island in the summer of 1587. The settlers began to rebuild what the first expedition had left behind. They raised homes, planted crops, and prepared for the coming winter. The birth of Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, seemed like a good omen. For a moment, hope filled the colony. They believed they were building the first piece of England on the shores of a new world. But that dream was fragile. Supplies were already running low, and tension with the surrounding tribes was growing again. The settlers pleaded with John White to return to England and bring back food, tools, and reinforcements. It was a choice no leader wanted to make. Leaving meant abandoning his family and people to uncertainty. Staying meant risking their survival. John White chose to go, promising that he would return quickly. As his ship faded into the horizon, the people of Roanoke watched and waited, not knowing that this farewell would be their last. Did you know that when White finally returned 3 years later, he would find not a colony, but a ghost? The dream of Roanoke had begun as England's hope for a new world, but it was already slipping into the realm of legend. When John White set sail from Roanoke in 1587, he believed he would return within a few months. The settlers watched his ship vanish into the horizon, holding on to that promise as they faced the vast and unfamiliar wilderness of the New World. For them, every sunrise brought new uncertainty. They were surrounded by thick forests and unfamiliar people, their supplies were scarce, and their leader was gone. Yet they waited, believing that help was on the way. But help did not come. England was thrown into chaos. The Spanish Armada, the greatest naval threat of the age, had set sail to invade. Every English ship was called to defend the homeland. John White's pleas to return to Roanoke were denied again and again. Months turned into years, and the memory of the small colony faded from the minds of those in power. For the settlers, isolation became their new reality. It was not until 1590, 3 long years later, that White finally secured passage back to the New World. When his ship reached the coast of North Carolina, his heart raced with both hope and dread. As they approached Roanoke Island, a strange silence filled the air. No smoke rose from cooking fires. No one came running to the shore. The colony that once bustled with life was eerily still. When White and his crew stepped onto the island, the scene before them was haunting. The fort's walls were broken and weathered. Houses stood empty, their roofs caved in, overtaken by vines and sand. Tools lay scattered on the ground as if dropped mid-task. It looked as though the settlers had simply vanished. There was no sign of battle. No bodies. No graves. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. Then, near the entrance to the settlement, White found a tree with a single word carved deeply into its bark: CROATOAN. That one word was both clue and curse. It was the name of a nearby island and of the friendly tribe that had once traded with the English. White's heart surged with hope. The colonists must have relocated to CROATOAN Island for safety. That was the plan they had agreed upon if trouble ever came. He urged the ship's captain to sail south immediately. But fate intervened again. A violent storm struck the coast before they could reach CROATOAN. The winds howled, waves crashed, and the ship was forced back to sea. The crew, exhausted and fearful, refused to risk another attempt. White begged them to turn back, but they would not. With a heavy heart, he set sail for England, leaving behind the mystery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. No one ever saw the Roanoke colonists again. They left behind no letters, no remains, no clear sign of what had happened. Only that single carved word and a question that still echoes across centuries. Did the settlers survive and join the CROATOAN people? Were they attacked by rival tribes or captured by the Spanish? Or did starvation and disease drive them to desperation? For historians, these clues are fragments of a vanished story. For centuries, they have been pieced together, examined, and re-examined, but the truth has never fully come to light. John White died in England, never knowing the fate of his family, or the colony he had built. What remained was a legend that refused to fade. The Lost Colony became one of the oldest unsolved mysteries in American history. But what if the truth was never lost? What if clues were hidden in plain sight, buried in maps, reports, and forgotten artifacts? As we move deeper into this mystery, we begin to uncover what history overlooked, the details that hint at a secret buried beneath centuries of silence. The story of Roanoke was not over. It was only beginning. For centuries, the story of Roanoke has been told as a simple tragedy. A colony vanished, leaving behind nothing but a word carved into a tree. But history is rarely simple. Beneath the familiar story lies a web of forgotten evidence, political intrigue, and silent cover-ups that suggest the truth may have been known all along. In the archives of England, hidden among fading ink and brittle parchment, are records that hint at a deeper mystery. Some of these documents were written by men close to Raleigh himself, men who had much to gain or lose depending on how Roanoke's story was told. Their letters speak of secret orders, of coded messages, and of expeditions that may never have been meant to succeed. One such clue comes from a map drawn by John White, the very man who led the colony. His map of the Carolina coast, long preserved in the British Museum, was once thought to be nothing more than a beautiful work of cartography. But in 2012, researchers examining it with advanced light technology discovered something extraordinary. Beneath a patch of paper on the map, a hidden symbol was revealed, a small red and blue star. It marked a location about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island. Why would White hide a symbol beneath the surface of his own map? Was it a clue to the colony's true location, concealed from prying eyes? Or was it a secret meant for someone else, a silent message buried in ink? Some historians believe this hidden mark could point to where the colonists relocated after leaving Roanoke, possibly along the Chowan River, where remnants of European tools have been discovered. Other records suggest that not everyone in England wanted the colony's fate to be uncovered. The failure of Roanoke was an embarrassment for the Crown. It represented not just lost lives, but lost pride and lost investment. To admit what truly happened might have damaged England's dreams of empire before they had even begun. Perhaps it was easier to let the mystery linger, to let the colony fade quietly into myth. Then there are the Spanish records. Spain had powerful interests in preventing England from establishing any permanent settlements in the New World. Their spies were everywhere, watching, reporting, sabotaging. Some documents suggest that Spanish patrols scoured the Carolina coast around the same time the settlers disappeared. Could they have attacked Roanoke in secret, erasing all evidence before sailing away? Or did they simply find the colony already abandoned? Even more curious are the reports from later explorers who claimed to have encountered native tribes with members who spoke broken English, or who had gray eyes and lighter skin. These reports, scattered across decades, suggest that at least some of the Roanoke settlers may have survived by joining the local tribes. Yet no single piece of evidence has ever confirmed this theory. Did you know that archaeologists have found fragments of English pottery deep inland, far from the island itself? These shards date back to the exact period of the Roanoke colony. How did they get there? Were they carried by traders, or by the colonists themselves as they sought a new home beyond the coast? Each discovery adds another piece to a puzzle that refuses to fit neatly together. What history often overlooks is that Roanoke was not just a failed colony. It was part of a greater plan, one that may have continued long after its supposed end. Raleigh's charter still promised land and fortune to those who claimed it. Expeditions continued, and whispers of survivors persisted for generations. The truth may not be a single revelation, but a collection of hidden fragments scattered across time. Letters coded with symbols, maps layered with secrets, and artifacts buried in forgotten soil all tell parts of the same haunting story. If these clues are real, then perhaps Roanoke was not truly lost. Perhaps the settlers found a way to survive, blending into the world around them until history itself forgot their names. But where truth ends, legend begins. And in the centuries that followed, the story of Roanoke would grow far beyond the boundaries of fact. Because what came next would transform a historical mystery into something much larger, something darker. The birth of myths, curses, and conspiracies that would echo through time. As the centuries passed, the mystery of Roanoke began to drift from history into legend. The disappearance of the colonists was no longer just a question for scholars and explorers. It became a haunting tale whispered in taverns, written in novels, and feared in folklore. What began as an unsolved event slowly evolved into something larger than life, something that carried a strange and eerie power. The most famous symbol of that power is the word carved into the tree: CROATOAN. For generations, it has been repeated like a spell, a word that seems to echo through time. Historians see it as a clue, but storytellers saw something more. Over the years, CROATOAN became linked to strange and unexplained events far beyond Roanoke. There are stories that the word appeared carved into a post at Fort Raleigh centuries later, just before a hurricane destroyed it. Some claim that the word was found scrawled in the journal of the writer Edgar Allan Poe shortly before his mysterious death. Others say it was written on the bedpost of the stage magician Houdini, or whispered by Amelia Earhart before she vanished over the Pacific. Most of these tales cannot be proven, but their persistence shows how deeply the word CROATOAN captured the imagination. It became a symbol of disappearance itself. Did you know that some native legends describe ghostly figures wandering the woods near Roanoke Island, pale-skinned spirits who spoke in a strange tongue and appeared only under the moonlight? Elders told of voices calling from the trees, echoes of those who were never laid to rest. These stories may be nothing more than folklore, yet they suggest that even the land itself remembers what happened there. As the centuries went on, new theories emerged. Some claimed that the colonists were taken by hostile tribes or wiped out by disease. Others suggested something far more supernatural. Tales of curses, witchcraft, and even dark rituals began to surround the island. It was said that Roanoke was built on sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The settlers, they whispered, had disturbed something ancient that did not want to be found. In the early 20th century, as America embraced its fascination with the paranormal, the legend of Roanoke grew wilder still. It appeared in books of ghost stories, in seances, and later in television shows that claimed to communicate with the spirits of the lost colonists. Each retelling added new layers, new shadows to the tale. But some conspiracies turned their gaze back to the world of men. What if Roanoke's disappearance was not a supernatural event, but a secret deliberately hidden by powerful people? Some historians believe that the colony was part of an espionage mission meant to spy on Spanish territories. If that is true, then perhaps the settlers did not vanish at all. Perhaps they were relocated, their existence erased to protect a greater political secret. There is even speculation that Sir Walter Raleigh himself may have known more than he ever revealed. When he was later imprisoned in the Tower of London, he never spoke of the lost colony again. He died with the mystery still unsolved, leaving behind questions that no one dared to answer. The beauty of Roanoke's story is also its curse. It exists at the edge of fact and fiction, where evidence fades and imagination fills the gaps. It invites belief and disbelief in equal measure. Every generation reshapes it to reflect its own fears and dreams. To some, Roanoke is a story of hope, of survival against impossible odds. To others, it is a ghost story, a warning that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Yet, for all its myths and conspiracies, one truth remains unchanged. 115 people stepped onto that island and vanished. They were real men, women, and children who carried dreams of a better life. The legends that grew from their disappearance remind us how fragile history can be, and how quickly the line between truth and myth can disappear. But the legends are not the end of the story. Behind every myth is a fragment of truth waiting to be uncovered. And as archaeologists and researchers began to dig deeper, they started to find traces of the lost colonists in places no one expected. History often remembers the powerful, the conquerors, and the kings. But the story of Roanoke belongs to those whose voices were never written down. The settlers who disappeared were not just names on a list. They were families, mothers, fathers, and children who carried the weight of dreams that history erased. Their stories linger in fragments, faint traces of lives that ended somewhere between myth and memory. To understand what may have happened to them, we must listen to the people who lived closest to the mystery. The native tribes of the region, the CROATOAN, the Secautan, and others, have kept stories passed down through generations. Some tell of strangers who arrived in their villages long ago. These strangers were pale, weak, and starving, but they were welcomed and taught how to survive. Over time, they married into the tribes, adopted their customs, and vanished into a new identity. Archaeologists have found clues that seem to support these stories. Fragments of English pottery have been discovered miles inland, in places no English ship could have reached. The design of the pottery matches the kind made in England in the 1580s, the same decade the settlers disappeared. Alongside these artifacts, researchers found traces of European tools and weapons buried within native sites. These are not random discoveries. They hint that the colonists may have moved inland and lived among the tribes. Did you know that modern DNA testing has uncovered families in North Carolina whose ancestry traces back to both English settlers and native peoples? Their oral histories tell of ancestors who spoke of white relatives from long ago, people who came from across the sea and never returned. These stories may hold the truth that official records ignored. One of the most poignant clues lies in the legend of Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. Some native tales speak of a white doe, a ghostly creature said to roam the woods near Roanoke Island. According to the story, she was once a young woman transformed by a spell, forever wandering as a spirit of the lost colony. Many believe this legend was inspired by Virginia herself, the lost child who became a symbol of innocence swallowed by mystery. If the colonists truly joined the tribes, their disappearance was not a death, but a transformation. They did not vanish. They became part of the land, absorbed into a culture that outlived them. In doing so, they blurred the line between two worlds, English and native, creating a legacy that still whispers through the forests and rivers of the Carolina coast. Yet the official story of Roanoke rarely includes these voices. For centuries, the narrative was written from the perspective of those who left, not those who stayed. The native people who may have saved the settlers were ignored, their role dismissed as legend rather than fact. It was easier for history to call the colony lost than to admit it had changed shape and survived in a way that defied empire and expectation. Even John White's records, as detailed as they were, contains silences that speak louder than words. His journals describe the land and its people with beauty and curiosity, yet his final entries end abruptly, without closure. It is as if he knew more than he could write, or perhaps as if he chose to leave the ending open, letting the mystery breathe on its own. The untold stories of Roanoke are not about failure or disappearance. They are about resilience, adaptation, and the ability of human beings to survive against all odds. The colonists may have lost their language, their homes, and even their names, but they found a new way to live when all hope seemed gone. That kind of survival is not tragic. It is heroic. When we speak of Roanoke, we often picture ghosts and empty huts, but perhaps we should picture something else. A woman teaching her child new words in a new tongue. A man learning to hunt, not as an outsider, but as part of a community. A child laughing by the river, unaware that they are the living link between two worlds. The colony may have been lost to England, but it was not lost to time. Its spirit lived on in the people who carried its story forward. Still, even with these clues, one question remains. If the settlers found a new home, why did no one ever return to tell their tale? Why did silence endure for so long? The answers to those questions lie not only in what they did, but in how their story changed the world that came after them. Because what began as a small experiment on a distant shore would shape the course of an entire nation's history. The story of Roanoke did not end on that empty island. Its disappearance echoed across generations, shaping the identity and imagination of a nation that was still centuries away from being born. Though the colony itself was lost, its legacy became a shadow that followed every voyage, every settlement, and every dream that came after. For England, Roanoke was a painful lesson. It revealed the brutal truth about colonization, that ambition alone could not tame the wilderness. Supplies could fail, leadership could falter, and even the most hopeful dreams could vanish without a trace. Yet the loss did not stop them. In many ways, it fueled them. The mystery of Roanoke haunted the next generation of explorers and settlers, pushing them to learn from its mistakes and to conquer the same fears that had consumed the first colony. When the Jamestown colony was founded in 1607, just 20 years after Roanoke disappeared, its leaders carried the weight of that memory. They came with stronger ships, better planning, and a deeper understanding of the land and its people. But even in Jamestown's earliest records, there are whispers of Roanoke. Some settlers claimed that native tribes spoke of white people who had come before, who built homes and left their mark on the land. These stories spread through the new colonies, turning Roanoke into both a warning and a legend. Did you know that Virginia Dare, the baby born at Roanoke, became one of the first symbols of American identity? Poets and writers of later centuries transformed her story into that of a lost princess of the New World, a figure of innocence and mystery. To many, she represented the beginning of America itself, not just through her birth, but through the mystery surrounding her fate. The tale of Roanoke also became a reflection of the American spirit, the endless pursuit of the unknown. It captured the imagination of explorers who saw the New World as a place of both danger and possibility. The colonists' disappearance served as a reminder that progress often comes with a cost, and that every frontier holds secrets that cannot be controlled. But Roanoke's influence was not only emotional. It changed how England approached its empire. The tragedy exposed the need for stronger support, more structure, and greater understanding of indigenous alliances. The English learned to rely on communication and trade with native nations, realizing that survival depended on cooperation rather than dominance. This lesson would shape the strategies that led to future colonial success and ultimately, to the birth of the United States. As the centuries passed, Roanoke transformed from a cautionary tale into a cultural myth. In the 19th century, American writers began to romanticize the story, turning it into a symbol of the nation's mysterious past. Artists painted ghostly depictions of the abandoned colony, while historians and novelists reimagined the settlers as pioneers of destiny. Roanoke became part of the American consciousness, a blend of truth, tragedy, and legend that reflected the soul of a growing nation. In the 20th century, the mystery found new life in films, books, and television. It became a subject for archaeologists, conspiracy theorists, and storytellers alike. Each generation rediscovered Roanoke in its own way, asking the same question: how could an entire community disappear without a trace? The question itself became more important than the answer. Perhaps that is why Roanoke endures. It is not just a historical mystery. It is a mirror. It reflects humanity's desire to explore, to conquer, to belong, and to understand. It reminds us that progress is never guaranteed and that the pursuit of knowledge always comes with uncertainty. In a way, the legacy of Roanoke is written not in what was found, but in what was lost. The colony's silence became a symbol of the unknown, a story that invites endless curiosity. It shaped the way Americans view their history, their myths, and even their sense of destiny. Every time we look at a map and see blank spaces filled with possibility, every time we wonder about the secrets hidden in the past, we are following in the footsteps of Roanoke. Its story is woven into the fabric of the nation, a reminder that mystery is part of our origin, and that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that refuse to end. Yet, even after centuries of searching, one question continues to linger. What if the story of Roanoke is not just a mystery of the past, but a message for the present? What if its silence is still trying to tell us something about who we are and where we come from? The answers may lie not in the ruins of the colony, but in the possibilities that still surround it. And to find those answers, we must turn to the world of speculation, to the theories that stretch beyond history and into imagination. Because Roanoke's legacy does not just shape the past. It reaches forward into the realm of what might have been. For more than 4 centuries, the lost colony of Roanoke has defied every attempt to solve its mystery. Historians, explorers, and scientists have sifted through every clue, yet the final answer remains just out of reach. With each generation, new theories emerge, each one offering a glimpse into what might have happened after John White sailed away. Some are grounded in evidence. Others stretch into the realm of imagination. But together, they form a mosaic of possibilities that keep this story alive. The most accepted theory among historians is that the settlers moved south to live among the CROATOAN people. It is the simplest explanation and the one supported by the single word carved into that tree. Archaeological finds of English artifacts near Hatteras Island give weight to this idea. Pieces of copper, gun flints, and fragments of pottery have been uncovered there, suggesting that the colonists may have integrated with the local tribes. Over time, they could have become part of the native communities, their English identity blending into something new. But not everyone agrees. Some researchers argue that the colonists may have attempted to move inland instead, seeking safety along the rivers or in the fertile lands they had heard about during earlier explorations. The hidden mark found beneath the patch on John White's map supports this theory. It points to an inland location that may have served as their new settlement. If this is true, the colonists might have survived for years, forgotten by the world that left them behind. There is another possibility, one much darker. Some believe that the settlers met a violent end, either at the hands of rival tribes or as victims of disease and famine. The lack of human remains does not disprove this theory. The environment of Roanoke Island, with its shifting sands and coastal erosion, could have easily hidden or destroyed evidence over time. In this version of the story, the settlers' fate was not one of survival but of quiet erasure by nature itself. Then there are those who see the disappearance as something more deliberate. They suggest that the colony's failure may have been covered up by the English government. Admitting that the first attempt to colonize America had ended in disaster could have damaged England's ambitions at a time when it was competing with Spain for global power. In this version of the story, Roanoke was never truly lost. It was silenced. The truth may have been buried under the weight of politics, pride, and the desire to preserve England's image of strength. Did you know that there are even theories connecting Roanoke to the secretive world of Elizabethan espionage? Some believe the colony was established not only for settlement, but also as a covert operation to observe Spanish activity along the Atlantic coast. If that is true, the settlers may have been spies as much as pioneers. Perhaps they were relocated to another area under orders that were never recorded. If so, the word CROATOAN may not have been a distress signal at all, but a code. Beyond these historical theories lies a realm of imagination that captures the public's fascination. Some stories suggest that supernatural forces were involved. Legends speak of curses placed upon the land, of spirits guarding sacred territory, and of strange lights seen in the forests near the old settlement. These tales, though unproven, remind us that the unknown often inspires the human mind to reach beyond logic. Others have suggested environmental causes. Perhaps rising tides or a violent hurricane destroyed the colony and washed it away. The Carolina coast is notorious for its storms, and a single tempest could have easily wiped out an entire settlement, leaving behind little more than scattered debris. Modern science continues to probe these mysteries. Archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar to search for buried foundations. Geneticists study the DNA of families in the region, hoping to trace their ancestry back to the settlers. Each discovery brings us closer, yet the final piece of the puzzle remains missing. Every theory reveals something about the people who tell it. The historians seek reason. The believers seek wonder. And the dreamers seek connection. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, part history, part legend, a story that refuses to be confined to one explanation. The question that has haunted every generation still lingers. What if the colony was never lost at all? What if the settlers did exactly what they set out to do, survive in a new world, free from the reach of the old one? In that sense, Roanoke might not represent failure, but transformation. The colony could have become the seed of something greater, a hidden beginning that helped shape the identity of the continent itself. Maybe they lived, thrived, and simply ceased to be English. It is a haunting possibility, one that changes how we see the past. The mystery of Roanoke is not just about loss. It is about the human instinct to adapt, to endure, and to start again when everything seems hopeless. And as we approach the end of this story, one final question remains. If the settlers truly found a new way to live, why has history chosen to remember them as lost? Perhaps the answer lies in the silence that followed. In that silence may rest the most haunting revelation of all. The mystery of Roanoke has never faded because it speaks to something deeper than history. It is not just a story about a vanished colony. It is a reflection of human curiosity, ambition, and the need to understand where we come from. For more than 4 centuries, people have searched for answers, but perhaps what keeps us captivated is not the truth itself, but what the mystery represents. Roanoke is a story of beginnings. It was the first spark of English ambition in the New World, the fragile seed of a future that would grow into a nation. Yet its disappearance reminds us that every beginning is uncertain. For all our plans and dreams, there are forces beyond our control that can erase us without a trace. The settlers of Roanoke crossed an ocean to find a new life, but what they found instead was the unpredictable power of nature, isolation, and fate. The story also holds a mirror to the human spirit. These were people who dared to step into the unknown, to leave everything familiar behind. They built homes, planted crops, and welcomed a new generation with the birth of Virginia Dare. Their courage and hope echo across time, even as their fate remains hidden. In many ways, Roanoke's legacy is not its disappearance, but its defiance of despair. Did you know that every major discovery, every exploration, and every scientific leap in history begins with the same impulse that drove those settlers to the shores of North Carolina? The desire to know what lies beyond. Roanoke is a symbol of that eternal quest, the human urge to seek and to risk everything for the promise of something greater. But it also reminds us of the cost of forgetting. The voices of the native people who may have saved or absorbed the settlers were silenced for generations. Their role in the story was dismissed, their culture overshadowed by the European narrative. By revisiting Roanoke today, we are not only searching for the colonists, we are rediscovering the intertwined histories that built the world we live in. The mystery becomes a bridge, connecting the known and the unknown, the past and the present. Roanoke also teaches a lesson about legacy. The colonists may have vanished, but their story continues to shape how we see exploration, failure, and resilience. Their fate warns us that progress without understanding can lead to loss, but it also celebrates the courage to dream. Every time we look toward new frontiers, whether across oceans or beyond the stars, we carry the same questions that haunted Roanoke. What will we find? What will we lose? What will we leave behind? In a world where so much is known, the mystery of Roanoke endures as a reminder that not everything can be explained. Some stories resist conclusion because they belong to more than one truth. Perhaps that is why Roanoke still matters. It invites us to imagine, to question, and to remember that history is not just written in books, but in the silences between them. Even now, the winds still move through the trees of Roanoke Island, whispering across the ruins of time. Somewhere beneath the soil or within the tides, the echoes of that vanished colony remain. They remind us that the past is never truly gone. It waits, patient and quiet, for someone to listen. After centuries of searching, digging, and decoding, one haunting possibility rises above all others. Perhaps the colonists of Roanoke were never lost at all. Perhaps they survived, but at a cost that history was unwilling to accept. Archaeological evidence tells part of the story. Deep in the Carolina wilderness, far from the coast, artifacts have been uncovered: fragments of English pottery, a gun barrel, tools that match the exact make of those carried by the Roanoke settlers. These objects were found within the lands once inhabited by the CROATOAN and other Algonquian tribes. They were not scattered randomly. They were found among traces of native settlements, as if left by people who had lived there for years. What if the colonists did what they were forced to do to survive? They may have moved inland, seeking safety with their allies. Over time, they would have adopted the customs, language, and lives of those who took them in. They would have become something new, not English, not entirely native, but a blending of both worlds. A people without a single flag or a written record, but with roots stretching into both histories. It is possible that by surviving, they erased themselves from the story that England wanted to tell. The empire sought conquest and control, not adaptation and humility. The idea that its first colony had become one with the land and its people would have been seen as failure, even shame. So perhaps the colonists were not lost to time, but deliberately forgotten. Did you know that when the Jamestown settlers arrived 20 years later, some of the local tribes spoke of ancestors who came from the sea, who wore strange clothes and used foreign tools? They spoke of people who joined their communities and taught them new skills. These stories were dismissed as myth, but what if they were memories, the last echoes of Roanoke living through another name? The most haunting truth may be that the colony never vanished. It evolved. The settlers may have found what they were seeking all along, a new world where they could live free from the old one. In their disappearance, they achieved something extraordinary. They became part of the land they once feared. As the waves crash against the shores of Roanoke Island today, the air still carries that question. The wind whispers through the trees and across the dunes, as if repeating a word carved long ago: CROATOAN. It was not just a clue. It was a message. A destination. Perhaps even a promise. The lost colony was never truly lost. It was reborn in silence, hidden within the forests and the bloodlines of those who came after. And that is the most haunting truth of all. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not about death, but about survival. The waves still wash against the shores of Roanoke Island, the same tides that once carried those settlers to a land they hoped would become their future. The island remains quiet, its trees swaying in the wind, its sands hiding more questions than answers. And somewhere, beneath centuries of earth and memory, the truth still sleeps. The lost colony of Roanoke has become more than a historical mystery. It is a reflection of who we are. It reminds us that history is fragile, that the line between survival and disappearance is thinner than we like to believe. The people of Roanoke were not just victims of time, they were pioneers of the unknown. They ventured into a world that no one understood, guided only by faith and courage. Even in their silence, they left behind a legacy that continues to echo through every mystery we chase today. Did you know that every year, thousands visit Roanoke Island to stand where the colonists once lived, hoping to feel some trace of their story? Some say the island feels heavy, as if it remembers. Others say it feels peaceful, as though it has already forgiven the past. Perhaps that is the lesson Roanoke offers. That some stories are not meant to be solved, but felt. That loss and discovery often walk hand in hand. And that sometimes, the answers we seek are not buried in the ground but written in the questions we continue to ask. So, what do you believe happened to the lost colony? Did they perish, or did they find a new beginning hidden from history's gaze? The truth may never be known, but one thing is certain. The mystery of Roanoke endures because it belongs to all of us, a story of hope, courage, and the eternal search for meaning in the silence of the past. As the sun sets over the Carolina coast, the question still drifts on the wind. Where did they go? Maybe, just maybe, they never left at all.